Okay, today on the podcast, I'm rejoined by Mr. Gerard Browne from Irish Football Fan TV. Gerard, how are you doing, sir?
Not too bad, Morris, considering all things, given that we're still in a
Yeah,
level 5 lockdown and the last week of following the Irish national football team felt like being in level 10.
yeah,
It's definitely, I think there's been some tough international windows, I think, over the last couple of years since the Euro 2016 under the tail end of Martin O'Neill. Even Mick McCarthy had that shocker when we drew with Georgia away and lost to Czech or Switzerland crucial games. But I think this has definitely probably been the lowest. I know there's a comparison to Saturday's result to Liechtenstein under Jack Charlton, Macedonia twice under Mick McCarthy first time around, and obviously Cyprus under Steve Staunton, even scraping victories against the likes of San Marino and Kazakhstan. That one, of course, coming under Trapp's time. But I think Saturday for me probably was the lowest point of being an Irish football fan, unfortunately.
as an Arsenal fan, we've had a ropey season, so I was hoping that Ireland would give me a nice little break from the Premier League, but I think it didn't work out this time. And then now Arsenal are playing Liverpool on Saturday as well, so my misery might continue. I'm just kind of waiting
Don't
for the season to be over.
don't I could have hoped that. I'm a Liverpool fan. To be brutally honest, I enjoyed not having 3 weeks of having to worry about Liverpool, but unfortunately Ireland didn't do anything to lift the spirits. But fingers crossed from a Liverpool point of view that the recent results before the international break might be an upturn in their season. Obviously, they've got that crunch game against Atletico Madrid or Real Madrid even next week. Like so,
Yeah, and I
have to
quite
wait and
fancy
see.
them. I quite fancy them for that game.
I do as well. It's
Yeah,
not the same Real Madrid team as a couple of years ago that won the three in a row, and I think Atletico Madrid, I think, is a good gauge of their performance against Chelsea. I think the standard of the Spanish teams and Barcelona against PSG, the standard of the Spanish teams this year has been quite poor.
yeah, a lot of them are kind of aging over there, aren't they? They need a new influx of young players.
Yeah, certainly, but that's a discussion for another day, really, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll get into that at a different time. So listen, we'll
Yeah,
start off. We'll start off with the Serbia game. Like, it wasn't all bad, considering like it's a very tricky place to go in general for most teams, and it was a fairly, I think, spirited performance. It was one of the better performances under Kenny, but we couldn't get over the line. Like, I think even a draw against Serbia would have been a very decent point away from home. What did you think of that game?
yeah, I'd agree with you. It was probably up there as our second best performance after the Slovakia game in the playoff, which was encouraging to kind of see that at least you were coming away after that Serbia match thinking, right, at least the two main games that mattered so far, we've shown up and we've delivered. Forget the Nations League, which I think is Mickey Mouse
Yeah,
nonsense,
it's just a friendly.
glorified friendlies. And obviously the England game was just always going to be hiding to nothing because England are streaks ahead of us at the moment. Um, yeah, I'd agree with you. I thought it's a difficult place to go to, obviously purely because of long distance. Obviously not as intimidating anymore with no fans been there and everything else like that. It definitely was the only highlight from the three games in terms of performances. I thought it was quite a good performance. I didn't have much optimism going into it. Even though Serbia themselves had a ropey Nations League campaign, failed to qualify for the Euros themselves through the playoffs, still felt they had that little bit more individual quality than us. Like Tadic, we're all familiar with Sahan from the Premier League and Ajax. Vlahovic would have been kind of a fairly new player to me, but I would have been aware of him from Fiorentina. Jovic, I suppose we all would have known of, who signed for Real Madrid but gone back to Frankfurt, and obviously who else am I trying to think of? Savic, with
Yeah,
Ajax as well. And then obviously like even the likes of Mitrovic, who obviously turned the game really when he came on. Like we would have been aware of him his time from Fulham. So I was a little bit kind of wary anyway. Going into it, I felt they've had better underage pedigree than us. They've been at major tournaments at under 21 level where we haven't been. So I was never optimistic kind of going into that game. But when I seen the lineup, I kind of grew slightly because finally for once, he kind of played a system that kind of maybe suits a lot of our players, particularly like Doherty and Stevens, to get the best out of them, to get Coleman in the team as well. You just kind of wonder, like, why didn't he try that information during the Nations League? I like the fact that he was bold. He went with the younger players, the older players for me, the likes of Brady. I know he brought them on, Hendrick, McLean. They just haven't done it, and I'm kind of sick of looking at them at this stage. Like, so he was kind of bold. It started off well with Brown's goal. I honestly thought, like, I never seen us conceding before halftime. I thought we looked solid, composed, organised, and never really kind of threatened us. But just that little bit of brilliance, like a lovely little flick header from Tadic. You obviously would be, from an Irish point of view, critical of Clark, that like if you come, you have to get there
yeah,
and you have to take man the ball. And Darragh O'Shea, probably the only major fault you'd have from the three games, he just kind of caught a little bit napping. and Vlahovic took it brilliantly well. Second half, then I thought we started kind of okay as well. We put a couple of good moves together down the left and right hand side. Got a cross into the box at one stage from Stevens. Robinson was a bit unlucky to meet it. Another great play down the right. I think Doherty put a cross in. We got a corner from it. But then, just as I touched on already, Mitrovic, that was the big difference. They brought on a substitute who was a game winner, where we brought in Hendrick in the 60th minute. And initially, I kind of looked at it, I thought he did okay. He had a couple of nice touches and stuff like that. But we did kind of lose shape. There's no two ways about it. And like, I know Malumbi might have been a bit rusty and a bit rash in tackles, but we had shape with him and Cullen there. And obviously, like the first goal, I said this on our channel, like as much as you can kind of criticize Travers, and I was kind of thinking like, what was he doing kind of coming out? But obviously, I think
he was very, very nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he thought there was too much, there was more on that pass than he realised. And then he realised, oh crap, this pass is slowing down. Mitrovic just get to it. I better get back. But Mitrovic still must have been 25, 30 yards out. And to have
it was a great finish. Like I think a lot of people are criticising the goalkeeper there, but it was a great finish as well.
Like to have the balls, I think, to do what he did, because most players, I know he was at an angle, but he pretty much had a clear run on goal. Most players would have taken a couple of touches, compose themselves, and attempt to slot a past the keeper. He done the audacious thing that 9 times out of 10 would have went over the bar, or backtrack and Travers would have caught or flicked out for a corner, and it went in. And I just kind of felt definitely with that winning, it's like, right, we're definitely not going to get a result here. And then the third goal again, just a little bit more, like I forgot to mention about the pass through to him though from Tadic was just different gravy. And then his little bit of quality again. He dictated that game for me. Him and the other fella in their front three. I'm not sure what club he plays for. Juric. I thought in the first half as well. He was kind of he was their go-to man. But in fairness to us, we didn't throw in the towel. Like 2 of our substitutes, Long and Collins. Fairness to Shane Long, he chased lost causes all day. His finishing, which might get onto later, will always be a lot to be desired. But he didn't really have a right to win that ball. He didn't look much on, but fair play to him, kept alive and Collins. But even still, I just felt it was going to be a consolation. I never felt, even though with 5 minutes in injury time, we were going to get anything from it. You could be a bit biased and say we deserved a draw. I think maybe if we
think we did.
I don't think you could have said it was undeserved, but I think like Serbia, it was one of them. It was weird because we were talking off air, like the amount of games under O'Neill where we got battered in general play, but we still snuck a victory. This was kind of just a day where, like, defensively, I know we can see 3 goals, but we didn't do a lot wrong. They just literally took their chances that kind of came. They were just clinical, had that bit of quality, had someone who off the bench could make an impact. I know you can say, well, Long set up a goal for another substitute, but at the crucial stage, we brought on 3 of our senior players, Brady, Hendrick, and McLean, and none of them really had a major impact in the game. Where Mitrovic, who, just like them 3 players, not getting much of a look in the club form, but he turned it on the international stage.
That's what I was going to say. So, that, like, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, our players are not playing much. But Mitrovic, like, he's barely kicked the ball this year and he delivered. So that excuse kind of goes out the window, really, doesn't it? You think players that haven't been playing will be hungry to play.
Yeah, and even I think if we're obviously going to have to touch on, unfortunately, the Luxembourg games. So I think only 3 of their starting 11 has played double digits of games for their clubs this season. So, like, it's one of them you can't kind of overly kind of use it as an excuse. As you say, like, you're looking at Mitrovic, he's a Premier League striker, but Fulham are 3rd bottom of the Premier League. They've been struggling for goals all season, and Scott Parker doesn't seem to fancy him. So that's kind of saying something that you'd be a little bit worried about. But he is one of them players. I think David Healy was the same for Northern Ireland. He just turns it on for Serbia. And to be brutally honest, I think he bullied us. He's a physical player, and I think he was probably a bit too much. I think he did do it the same to Darragh O'Shea at club level before in the past. I think he probably bullied him. Clark, I think, like, you'd have to question Clark anyway, like the fact he didn't even take Tadic over or win the ball. Like, so I'm pretty sure if he was a bit scared of Tadic, Jesus Christ, can you imagine what he would have been like up against Mitrovic? Like, I've been a little bit critical of Clark in our own channel. I just think that Newcastle are crying out for a leader in the Premier League in their situation. He's one of their most experienced players, and while he might be doing okay in his individual roles, he's not going above and beyond, which is a player Newcastle looking for, and he's brought that kind of into Ireland as well. But just going back to your initial point, like, while we mightn't have had players playing regularly, like, it was weird, like, same for Serbia, but like Savic is playing regularly in Serie A in the Champions League and he doesn't even come on for them. Jovic, even when he comes off the bench for them, like, so it's a weird one, kind of like.
Do you think there was an argument to have Shane Duffy in the team regarding their physicality and the way they could have lined up with Mitrovic? I know a lot of people were saying that maybe he shouldn't play because of the form that Celtic are in. But do you think club form is often brought into international football? Like when you look at it, we had a lot of corners against Serbia, 9 in total. And we didn't really have that big aerial threat that he gives us. He's dangerous from set pieces. Do you think he should have played?
Well, when you put it that way, that we had 9 corners, you're definitely thinking Shane Duffy with his threat.
Yeah.
There's a good chance he would have at least probably gone the end of 3 or 4 of them, and his headers were never far away. And again, another beauty with the benefit of hindsight is I think he would have, in Clark's situation for that first goal, I think he would have won the ball, because in fairness to Duffy, he's always been very, very strong in the air. And there is sometimes that element, like James McLean would have been a prime example, like when he had that fantastic run for Ireland in the qualifying campaign for the 2018 World Cup. He was barely getting a look in with West Brom at the time in the Premier League. So sometimes it's a distraction. It takes him away. He can forget about his Celtic kind of form and everything else like that. But the only, I think, concern with Shane Duffy was even his last couple of performances for Ireland, particularly in the November break, were not good. And it was clear, like after the Ireland games against England and Wales, he needed to be taken out of the limelight. And like we had a scenario and situation where O'Shea, who a lot of people would question, maybe he's the one who come in for, he's young. So he was our best player of the 3 games, and he's playing regularly in the Premier League.
Yeah.
Likewise with the likes of, I know I was critical of him again, but Clark, Stevens, Coleman, Doherty. So it's a tough one. Like I would have said no, like I wouldn't have had him in the team before the game. I know now when you look back and you have some information, you're kind of thinking, but like you're always going to get that, and you're always like the benefit of hindsight and stuff like that. I still think probably still wouldn't have won the game, to be brutally honest.
Do you think it's a fair point to say that the manager doesn't trust the senior players?
You would have to probably think, like I thought, I know again, don't want to kind of jump 2 steps ahead, but even the Qatar game, I even thought that was a good opportunity to bring even more fringe players. I know Parrott got the equivalent of a good run out in the end because of Brady's injury early on. But I thought that was a chance to start, maybe even give Curtis a start. Manning in particular, who's now broken into the Swansea team that are pushing hard for the Premier League. I know he didn't have the best of debuts against Bulgaria and went down with cramp and stuff like that. And you're wondering, is he up to his level? But let's see how he is again, kind of like that. But probably, to answer your question, I think so, because like there would have been a lot of tired bodies, and he touched on his press conference afterwards that like a lot of the players, the younger players, are still struggling to adapt to the demand of playing quick turnover games in the international window. So you kind of would have felt the Luxembourg game, even though everyone kind of felt it was a bit of we were hoping it was going to be a bit of a game, but we still felt it was a must-win game. Maybe you kind of felt that was a chance to kind of bring in fresh legs and impetus and kind of rest kind of some of the younger lads that probably would just put so much into Wednesday's match, because it is a quick turnaround, 48 hours there or 72 hours there, and you have to fly home and stuff like that. But the fact that he still largely stuck with a lot of them, and if anything, he brought in Jason Knight, another young lad, you probably would slightly question. Does he? I know he brought in Collins, but Collins is, I know he's an older player, but he's still very new to the Ireland setup. So you will kind of think that I think we're kind of probably going to see even more of this campaign goes on, especially now the fact that like I couldn't say that the shackles are off because he really needs to keep his job, but in terms of there's no pressure in terms of qualification, I think
it's over, really, isn't it?
Younger players are on because that he's worked with them on train 1 level, and he's still stuck by a lot of them for the Luxembourg match.
Yeah, we'll touch on the Luxembourg match, and the one big positive from the Luxembourg match, and there's not too many of them, was the goalkeeper, Bazunu. What did you make of his performance and his leadership?
Yeah, very, very, very impressed. To be honest, when Randolph and Kelleher were ruled out, I wanted Bazunu in goals for the Serbia game. I don't kind of want to say like, kind of told you so kind of thing, but I feared that what happened, Travers, was that something like that was going to happen. It's happened to him a couple of times with Bournemouth. I know everyone says he looked great in his debut against Spurs, but he played a game last season against Watford, made a couple of mistakes, made a mistake in the opening day for them as well against Blackburn this season, and hasn't gotten looking with them since. And I just kind of feared, just when you kind of get them things, it's very hard to remove your mind. And now there's your third strike, and you're kind of thinking, geez, is that kind of it from him? And Bazuna, I know it's only League One, but he's been playing regularly this season. He's getting rave reviews in the struggling Rochdale team. And then when you see his performance on Saturday, he done very, very well. He was very, very composed. You look at our best chance of the game was Collins' chance. He started that by playing the ball out to Doherty, not just playing the safe pass, he played a risky pass out into the right wing. He looked composed under any early balls, high balls coming in. I thought he dealt with Rodriguez's long-range shot done well. He was aware of the situation that there was no one kind of closing in, and instead of trying to catch it, momentum carrying it, just palmed it down, knowing they had the safety, that there was no one rushing in the 6-yard box. Read that very well. Made a couple of quick reaction saves in the second half. No one of them was offside. The goal couldn't really do much about it. It was a great strike from Rodriguez. It sipped off the ground as well. It was rain, so when the ground is wet, it obviously picks up more pace. And I think we even touched on it as well. He was probably passing before he even knew it. But no, he was very, very impressive. He probably was him and I think Coleman's performance as well outfield, who obviously ended up getting the RT man of the match, were probably the only two highlights from Saturday night.
Do you think there's a case to stick with him in goals?
It's interesting because we were doing the watch along Saturday, and Paul was at the game, and we went over to him, or he joined us, I should say, on Saturday, and he kind of thinks he's put a good card down for himself, that he thinks he might be ahead of the reckoning now in terms of Kelleher. And like, in fairness to Kelleher, he's a very, very similar goalkeeper to himself, very, very good with the feet, which is something that obviously Klopp likes. That's why he's promoted him to number 2 behind Alisson.
Yeah.
And that, Kenny obviously is so fond of him. But it's hard to know, like, Kelleher has dealt with aspects of playing crucial Champions League matches for Liverpool. Obviously, we've yet to see him in the green jersey kind of yet, but there's no two ways about it. Like, he's done his cause absolutely no harm. Nothing against Darren Randolph. Fantastic servant for us down through the years, but there could be an argument case that this might be his last campaign. He's, probably going to be looking for a move, I'd say, from West Ham. That move hasn't quite worked out. He'll probably move back down to Championship for regular football. So we might be seeing the tail end of him. I think still long-term going at the moment, I think it's probably going to be a 50-50 call between Kelleher and Bazuna. But I think Kenny will want to see Kelleher in a green shirt. He won't just kind of go off what we've seen him in Liverpool shirt. I think them summer games would probably see him, and it'd be interesting, but there's not much in the age gap. Kelleher, I think, is 22, 23. Bazuna's 19. There could be a right good battle between them two if they live up to their potential for the next 10 years, 15 years, because goalkeepers have long longevity, as we know.
Yeah, and they're two modern goalkeepers, which will help with the manager's style of play that he's trying to implement as well, which is really nice to see.
Yeah, that's kind of, as we touched on, like, that's why Kelleher has been promoted to number 2 at Liverpool, because he's in that new school of teaching, or school of goalkeeping, like Alisson. Bazuna, I know he's on loan at Rochdale, but he's done very for Man City. Like, but there's a good chance. Like, now, I don't think he'll be part of Man City's plans again next season, but it's a good chance though. Like, he'd be looking at Championship football, and even that's just moving up the ladder at that age group. That age profile is very important.
I would still say Man City would be thrilled to have him on that stage though the other night as well.
Yeah, because like that was definitely his biggest test, and like, if you can deal and handle international football, I know, albeit it was only Luxembourg, it's a good early indication already. Like, when he gets thrown in, when the day hopefully comes where he gets his Manchester City first team debut, he'll have Ireland international games and he'll have the nerves and have experience of doing that, and that is definitely going to stand to him, because at the end of the day, representing your country, it probably is the biggest honour in your career. So it's that you're playing at a very, very high level, and he's already ticked that box.
I did think we gave away a lot of space against Luxembourg, particularly Rodriguez, which was the danger man as well. Like, he had a few shots, like the one that was clawed off the line, and he looked dangerous all night. It didn't seem that we dealt with his threat well, like, because he's head and shoulders their best player for sure.
To be honest, I actually would be slightly the opposite too. I thought we did quite okay, and I'm like, because obviously he would have been the main focus because he was the one player on the pitch with Champions League football. Now, very limited game time with Dynamo Kiev, who are no great shakes. Like, I think they even went out in the round of 32 in the Europa League, so they're a
Champions League group stage regular, really.
Yeah.
That's about as far as
I thought, like, there was another shot as well in the first half where he tried to get off. It was kind of a half chance, and Clark blocked it very well, in fairness to him. But I felt your man, the two Till brothers, I think it was Vincent. I thought he was very impressive tonight. He's only 21 years of age. He's playing his club football over in Portugal. Be interesting to see. I'm going to kind of keep an eye out for him and see what his name is going to pop up much in the career. I thought he was very well. I thought we kind of struggled. Again, he kind of seems to be in that kind of number 10 kind of pocket. And again, it's somewhere we kind of seem to struggle to kind of stop the playmaker. But I agree with you. I just thought the lack of pressing on Saturday night was very, very worrying. I noticed it a good bit before half-time. They had a good spell of possession. Fair enough, they were only passing around in their own half and the halfway line. But I think then as the second half wore on and we dropped off in intensity in the second half from what we had in the first half. And then they had them couple of chances where Bazunu had to make the quick reaction. They realised, right, these boys are there for the taking. And they progressed confidently more into their own half. And we just kind of stood off them. And that was probably a big area that kind of concerned me, was just they always kind of say your defence starts from your first line of attack. And right from there, Robinson, Collins, I'm trying to even remember who else was up there because Browne moved to right wing back in the second half. But Knight, Cullen, they just stood off them a bit too much. And like, I know Kenny Cunningham was trying to say on RT afterwards, a couple of people saying that they're a good team pass, but they're where they are in the world for a reason. I know their result was very respectful when considering they got a man sent off against Portugal, but you just can't be making a team like that look better than what they are.
I think when you were talking about the number 10s and the pockets of space, I think we're missing a nasty DM to break up play in the middle of the park as well.
Yeah, I think as we touched on as well, like Cullen had some nice little touches on Wednesday. First half as well, I thought in the Luxembourg game, he had a lovely couple of through balls, but one great one through to Browne. He just couldn't control it and it ran out for a goal kick in the end. But yeah, you just kind of wonder, is that kind of like that doggedness and kind of like a Josh Cullen, like, you think back to the good old days when you had Roy Keane, and I know it's gone back a long time, but even like players like Lee Cards as well. I know I'm going back to that era, but they weren't kind of afraid to get stuck in. That was probably something that, while ability wise, I think he was kind of limited enough in us. But like when you think back towards the end of Martin Neal's time, a player that done really well because he had that edge to his game was someone like a David Myler. I think just kind of missing that kind of side of thing. I think Cullen, like, he's someone I was always a little bit unsure and unwary of. But I think he has proven, in fairness to him now, that he's good enough to play at this level, and he's still only 24. So he's kind of, I wouldn't clash him as a young player, but he's still too young to be kind of clashing his prime. So I think he's still got a good way ahead of him. Like, if he can just maybe get that side of things into his game, I think other than that, like, he's perfectly fine for that role. Malumbi now is someone who I think has that bit of bite about him. He kind of always seems to kind of play on the edge, but I think he was fairly rusty for the game on Wednesday night. The lack of club football with Preston kind of told, but he is a very, very good prospect going forward for the future. Hopefully now with Preston's new manager coming in and their double header of games coming up over the Easter weekend, it's a sign of a new turn for him at Preston. He'll get a good run out with them between the end of the season. That can help him progress going on because he's another good player, I think, that can play in that role.
I'd like to see a fellow Kilkenny man, Sean Maguire, get a run of games over in Preston, hopefully, as well, because the more options, the better, really, going forward.
Yeah, he's a player who's kind of really struggled with form. I don't think he made the squad in the end, if I'm correct in saying.
No, he didn't.
Called in the end,
no.
It's a weird one because, like, a couple of years ago when he did up the League of Ireland with Cork City, and in fairness to him, it's not too often we say this about a League of Ireland player, but he took to the championship fairly, very well, you have to say. Like, I know he had the odd injury setbacks, but like them times when Preston were pushing for the playoffs, he was getting crucial goals. But Preston have dipped off the last 2 years or so. Like, they're close now to relegation at the moment in the playoffs. Yeah. And injuries has just kind of seen him set back. A bit like another Preston man, Alan Browne, I just don't think he's grabbed his Ireland opportunities with two hands. And I just kind of think maybe his opportunities kind of come and gone, and you just can't kind of rely on him with injuries and stuff like that. But it is a shame because he was someone that looked a great kind of prospect. But unfortunately, like I said, I just think injuries are kind of catch up to him. I think he's had a couple of opportunities and he just hasn't really imposed himself enough, apart from that goal against New zealand I was going to say a couple of years ago. It was only actually the winter of 2019, but sure, COVID makes everything seem a lot longer ago anyway.
Yeah. It seems like a long time since we've been at a game. Yeah. But moving on to the Qatar game then, like, it was kind of a dead rubber, but there was a bit of pressure on the manager because of the two previous results. And he completely changed it up. He brought in a lot of senior players, and we kind of touched on it earlier. Like, maybe some of those players mightn't have a future. Like, if we're not going to qualify, I think it's probably fair to say. We'll know for sure after the next round of games when we play Portugal.
Should be optimistic and saying
that. Yeah. But mathematically, we'll know for sure, right? Yeah. So I think that there could be a lot of maybe these players could be planning on retiring because they might be looking and say, well, we don't have a chance to qualify for a major tournament until 2024. That's a long way away.
When you say like senior players, like what are you like talking like for say Jeff Hendricks, Robbie Brady, Shane Duffy's? But like 8, 4, 5 wise, they're still very young to continue. They're all only 28, 29. Like, so it's not like as if Father Time is caught up in them. I just think that
But no, if they're looking at it from, say, 3 years from now,
Yeah.
maybe the next time we have a chance of getting to a major tournament, will they call it a day?
I
don't
don't
know.
think they will. I still think that they can think that like they can turn and win Stephen Kenny's head over. I think unfortunately fitness is coming against. We talk about Sean Maguire. Fitness is coming against Robbie Brady. It's kind of
Yeah.
worrying. At 28 years of age or 29 years of age, he's struggling to get a run of games. He's struggling even to get 50 or 60 minutes out of him. I think he definitely would benefit, I think, from a proper close season and pre-season this year, and he'll be looking to hit the ground running in September. And Hendrick as well, the move just hasn't worked out for him at Newcastle, but he's a player who's really infuriated me since the Euros. I just don't think he's done it. I think at that stage he kind of was a new kid on the block, and now you're kind of expecting more from him, and he just hasn't delivered, and he's been playing like a senior player. In fairness to Duffy, I don't think you could fault him in a green shirt, probably except for the November games. Even the Slovakia match in the playoff, he was excellent. I still think them players will feel they can get back in. Euro 2024, fingers crossed we have a good end to this campaign. We can protect some sort of a decent seeding. Is a realistic possibility for Ireland. And I think they'd love to still get to a major tournament. I still think they'll kind of look and think that, like, right, we had that game the other night. The summer friendlies will be another chance to prove my point. They'll still prove that they can prove it to Stephen Kenny. Because if we're still playing Premier League football, or if Duffy can get a move to the Championship in the summer, like, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up at Nottingham Forest or Chris Hughton, because them two had a great relationship at Brighton. They'll still think they can kind of prove a point. I think maybe James McLean might be someone that age-wise and move into that category, but I think McLean is that type of player that unless he's forced to retire through injury or just not able to, he just would not hang up the boots for him. That's just because of the nature of who he is.
Yeah. And what about Randolph?
Yeah, as I touched on it there earlier, it depends. As I said, like, goalkeepers have longevity and everything else kind of like that, but Kenny is a man who likes to kind of play class in football, and Darren's from a little bit of a different kind of school of goalkeeping. Not that there's much wrong with him or anything else.
He's never let us down.
He's never let us down or anything else like that. But I think he might maybe kind of be looking at and thinking these young lads are kind of coming up. You know, Stephen might be taking a bit of a shine towards them. He might even pick up on a couple of things himself around the camp. As I said, like, I know he's with a Premier League club at the moment, but I don't think he's happy sitting on the bench the whole time. I think he'd gladly sacrifice moving back down to the Championship and playing regular again. Let's not forget as well, when he was with Middlesbrough in the Championship, he was one of the best keepers in that league. He had the best Golden Gloves record, clean sheets and stuff like that. So he'd be a number of Championship clubs would be well looking to snap him up. Or even, you never know, a Premier League club that comes up, someone like Norwich or Brentford, whoever gets them promotion places. But he might be one I think that might possibly be looking at. I think Shane Long as well. I think this will probably be his last campaign. And even though it's weird to say it because he's only joined the Ireland setup since Mick McCarthy's second spell, James Collins isn't the youngest either. Struggling for game time as well with Luton. He might maybe focus more on the club career after this. But you wouldn't know. But he's another one I would possibly think could be calling today when this campaign is up in November.
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is, like, when you can look back on these 3 games and you can dwell over them, but then you can look back further and say, right, the manager really needs a win now, just to steady the ship, really. And we've 2 friendlies coming up now in the summer, Hungary and Andorra, so 2 good chances to get a win. Now, Hungary are not a bad side either. Like, they've had mixed results lately, but they're a decent enough side. But Andorra surely will be expecting to get the first win there.
You should, but maybe I'm being too pessimistic here, but definitely if we don't win that Hungary game, which is a possibility, just the pressure going into that. I know it's only a friendly and Andorra or even a step below Luxembourg, but just the pressure, like, it could just... There's no two ways about it. If we got a positive result in Belgrade tonight, we don't lose that Luxembourg game. It's simple as confident. And I even thought the fact that we got a couple of goals and got that monkey off our back and we had a good performance, I thought there was plenty of momentum to carry into that Luxembourg game. But that doesn't happen. You're just kind of fearful now, like, we should lose to Andorra. I think there's no two ways about it. Even people like myself that still want to stick with Stephen Kenny, give him time and give him patience. If we don't win Andorra, honestly, it's bye-bye in P45. I'm sorry, but it shouldn't come to that. But no, like, it's just as you said, like, it's 11 games in, and like, for someone like, I know, like, you don't want to go into too much in yourself, but like I know you've seen from your social media. But for people like yourself that were maybe a little bit doubtful about Kenny and weren't fully on board, he hasn't done anything to turn the doubters. I know he says he doesn't care, but
Yeah, but do you know what? I like that bit of attitude he showed the other night, though. I have to say, I do like that, and he was biting back and giving his own, but still, he needs to back it up with results.
Yeah,
you know,
like I know Michael O'Neill was in a very familiar situation with Northern Ireland for stuff. I think it was 19 games and stuff like that as well. I think, in fairness, you forget as well, like this is Stephen Kenny's kind of first. Forget the Nations League. This is Stephen Kenny's first proper campaign. Michael O'Neill's first campaign in charge of Northern Ireland was a stinker. Like they couldn't beat Luxembourg or Azerbaijan home and away, which is something that could possibly happen. Us, it shouldn't. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But they got a couple of decent results against the big teams. They drew away to Portugal. They gave them a good game in the return game. They bet Russia at home as well. And that was enough to kind of convince people, like a similar background coming from League of Ireland, Shamrock Rovers, that he was kind of worth and everything. And then the next campaign just took off. Like, now, fair enough, they didn't have the hardest of groups, but it took off them. And that's kind of something you're still kind of thinking, like, if we could kind of be patient with that, like, but I think, like, at the end of the day, you still have to be winning these return games in Luxembourg. You still have to be beating Azerbaijan home and away. We still have to be at least aiming for third spot in this group to protect our seeding and everything else like that. And as you said, like, it's great to see he's coming out with the fighting spirit and everything, but he just does need to kind of back it up with a win. And maybe it is just going to be one of those where the win kind of comes, momentum kind of kicks in, and we could have a decent end to campaign, because I don't think the win, unfortunately, is going to come in our next match in the group. As in, I think we all know why you're going away to Lisbon. Play Portugal is going to be tough. But as I said, look, Northern Ireland got a point in that game in a similar situation, so you don't know. I know it's a good while ago now at this stage.
Stranger things have happened. Like, you look at Macedonia last night. I know we touched on it before we done this as well. Like, but they're an improving side. But still, to go away to Germany and win, like, you just don't know.
Yeah, it's very, very impressive. And even, like, we talk about cycles and stuff like that, it is interesting to see as well that, like, the North are entering a similar cycle to us. Like, Ian Barraclough as well is going through a similar drought. Like, I think he's only won 1 in 11 now himself as well. And can you even count that as an official victory because of the penalty shootout against Bosnia? And again, they're struggling for goals and stuff like that. So it is interesting how things go in cycles. But your North Macedonia point as well, it does kind of back up. These weaker nations are getting quite stronger. Like, we know, like North Macedonia, I know it was through League D in the Nations League, but they bet Georgia to get there. And we all know how difficult Georgia can be. Like, Georgia, one of the reasons why we got to Euro 2016. They're probably even one of the reasons why we got a playoff for the World Cup in 2018, because they drew with Wales and Cardiff.
Yeah.
Even look at the results the last couple of over the last week, like running Spain and Sweden close. So it just kind of shows that these countries are kind of gradually getting up there. And probably with the exceptions of your Gibraltars, who probably have even come on since they started into qualifying campaigns. San Marino and Andorra. None of these minnows are that bad. Like, Malta drew 2-0 with Slovakia. Then Slovakia beat Russia. So it just kind of shows that even who was it as well? France only beat Kazakhstan 2-0. Now, maybe France had a weak enough team out as well. Like, so it just shows that these things are very, very tight. Even Serbia as well. Like, they only had to get a late goal in the last 10 minutes to beat Azerbaijan. So there's no such thing as kind of like really kind of gimme games anymore, except for maybe them handful of countries that I just named out, like
the small countries.
Yeah.
But sure, listen, we'll catch up again hopefully in the summer after the 2 friendly games, and hopefully we'll have 2 W's on the board then.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, we'll be starving for that victory for the Hungary game.
Oh, I like that. Cheers, man. Thanks a million.
No worries. Thanks, Morris. Pleasure as always.